And indeed, I would like to invite, if they are in the room, the panelists for the EuroDIG, for the network neutrality session. I have Eva Ponova, Amelia Andersdotter, Luca Belli, and Gonzalo Lopez. And Fred Sorensen, of course. Sorry, Fred. So please, have a seat. Thank you. So, yes, it will be about network neutrality. You know, this is still a very sensitive topic. It's just a bit less sensitive, if I may say, than 10 years ago. At least we have people who agree, like today, to sit around the same table and discuss the topic. So it's already a great improvement. Everybody knows that this is still under discussion at the European Union level. We're in the middle of a trialogue. We should see something soon. Maybe not white smoke from the Latvian presidency. I don't know. I'm not in the secret, but yet there are a lot of discussion going on. This is something I'd like to come back on, actually. This is the paper that we produced in the working group ahead of this EuroDIG meeting. Is that okay? Wow. Is that better like this? Okay, good. Network neutrality, we all agree, is a very difficult concept. It's an ill-defined concept we used to say for years, and actually it's true. Whenever I go in a room or we stand discussing network neutrality, you understand people actually have different things in mind. Freedom of speech, competition issues, non-discrimination, traffic management, bandwidth management, etc. So what we've done in the working group ahead of this meeting, and that might just become a draft statement for the EuroDIG, was to address different angles. And actually we thought it would be a good idea not to try to tackle network neutrality as such, but try to take different angles. We will do the same here, hence the title of this session, which is How Can the Global Internet Coexist with IP services or specialized services, whatever you call them. I anticipate that we will address much more than this, but this is the angle we wanted to take. To help me doing this today, I have a wonderful panel, really multi-stakeholder, experts in their field, starting with you, Eva Ponova. You are a member of the European Parliament from the EPP group. You also are one of the founders of the Digital Agenda Intergroup. You're part of IMCO, among others, meaning Internet Market and Consumer Protection. You're Bulgarian from Sofia. You're one of the youngest MEPs, so we're very happy to have you here. Thank you. Amelia Andersdotter, for most people, you're still an MEP. You were an MEP not far away. You are now having many hats like most of us. You are a student, you are a member of FITUC. Thanks for joining. Frode Sorensen, you are with the Norwegian Communications Authority, but for many people, including myself, you're also one of the leader experts within the BEREC, which is the group of the European regulators on network neutrality issues. Thanks for being with us. Luca Belli, you also have many hats. I guess that I might say that your DNA is being an academic, although you've done many other stuff. You are one of the founder, or the founder actually, of the IGF Coalition on Network Neutrality, you know, working with the Vargas Foundation in Rio. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, Gonzalo Lopez, you accept to step in very last minute on behalf of Christoph Steck. Although we regret Christoph is not among us, I'm very happy to have you because you have been instrumental in the drafting of the paper that we all talk about those last days on network neutrality, and you are from Telefonica. Thanks a lot for joining us. I will start. I need to say that I will be helped today by a remote moderator. She stands far away over there. Thanks to Liana Galcian from ISOC Armenia. You also are a specialist in network neutrality in your country at European level. Thanks for, making bridge between remote participants in this panel. And last but not least, I have my colleague Dan York, who will actually have the difficult role of making bullets at the end of this session. Thanks a lot, Dan. I'd like to start with a very general questions and turn to you, Eva. And by the way, for complete transparency, I understand that you have limited time right now. We start late, and you have to dash out in 1 hour. So let's take benefit of your presence right now. I have a global questions. I understand that within the DSM, the digital market strategic plan from the European Union, network neutrality might be an important issue. So my question is, how important is it for having the European Union as a leader in the digital economy? I mean, and the contrary might be true. If we fail to have a compromise in the European Union, would it be detrimental for the whole plan, the strategic plan of the European Union? Please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Very happy to be here. When you were presenting the panel, you said we have a number of experts here. Well, I definitely do not qualify as an expert on the topic, but I'm someone that I'm very passionate about developing the digital single market across Europe as much as we can in the forthcoming years. And yes, I do believe Europe can be a much more of a leader in this type of a sphere. So I will just give you a couple of remarks that I've thought about that I would like to present to you, but I would be curious to hear the other speakers that are much more in-depth into the topic and share different perspectives. And we as policymakers tend to listen to all, at least I do. We all know that the people that created the internet, they were people with a vision. And without it, you would never create such an innovative new space for individual to openly share innovation and knowledge. And the vision of these creators was to ensure everyone, regardless of their location, to be able to have an effective platform for sharing. From today's perspective, although accessing internet everywhere, we take it something as for granted. But some years ago, some of us, and I remember the times when I was having difficulties, getting on the internet, and once I would be online, I felt like, wow, there's so many opportunities, and it's such a wonderful place. And I got reminded that it's something to some people looked like at some point in like falling into a rabbit hole like Alice in Wonderland once fell, and she found herself in Wonderland. But, she entered through a rabbit hole. We enter on the internet through all sorts of devices we can find, all different type of internet gadgets. But the success of the internet, to a large extent, is based on its openness and ability to really set a low burden in order to access it. So people have endless possibilities to improve competition and innovation in this way. And these are my 2 key words today. This is why we need this space to remain open in order to provide and to ensure that we have a fair and balanced access between users and service providers, which ensures equal treatment and no discrimination. And this is why I think open internet has to be the ultimate goal of every policymaker. And this is why the people that draft those laws, they need to understand one thing, including me. We need to understand what digital by default means, that digitalization is and internet is our 5th freedom nowadays. And sometimes I have difficulties, and you've been in the parliament as well, and sometimes you have difficulties explaining this to some of your colleagues. And when you're at the point where you need to negotiate and talk, you find yourself into a dreadlock, like we do currently with the Connected Continent discussions in the Council for quite some time now. My last point that I want to make is that and I will wrap it out there, that we need more innovation in Europe in order, if we want to be this competitive continent, if we want to be a leader, we need to invest in innovation. The market is constantly expanding, and in order to meet the needs of the existing demands, we have to support absolutely development of specialized services between users and providers. Consumers must have a choice, and me as a member of the Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee, this is the #1 thing I hear from numerous people and organizations across the continent. They have to have the freedom to easily access content and share information. So going back to Alice in Wonderland, her journey ends 5 miles away from where it started. Today, in the wonderful space that the internet offers, you can start it and end it wherever you want, or not even ever end it. And if we want to continue to have an open internet, it is of absolute importance to protect both the providers and the consumers. And this is what I'm trying to work on in the Parliament. And only a clear principle of net neutrality would help us in order for us to achieve that goal.
Thank you very much. So, thank you for this. We have a political view, and we understand it's fairly difficult. Actually, when you explain it, it seems crystal clear. So, where is the problem? Fraud. It should be easy, actually, to make sure that people understand that having choice, transparency, and different options open in order to achieve an open internet, that should be just 2 statements. So where is the issue?
For me, it seems like the net neutrality debate in Europe today is stalled by some confusion about the concept. How can we understand the discussion? What is the internet? What are the services provided outside the internet, etc.? So I'm looking forward to a deeper discussion today. As far as I understand, this panel is supposed to dig a little bit into these issues. But as a starting point for the discussion, why do we want to strive for net neutrality? The main objective of this is to preserve the internet as an open platform. That's obvious. But if you look a little bit more into the details, what are the success factors of the internet? To me, it seems like the internet allows for innovation without permission. It's a statement said many times before, and it thereby provides low entry barriers for new stakeholders. In addition to that, internet users have been able to control their own access to the internet. That's important, and it's a new dimension of the freedom of expression for us. Furthermore, internet applications, they are decoupled from the internet. So you're able to use the internet for different purposes. And finally, internet communication provides global connectivity. So you can communicate over the whole world using the internet. Note that I used the phrase user control instead of user choice, because it seems like today the phrase user choice is misleading people in this discussion. It's not about choosing an access that is open, it's a question about having an access that is open. So you can use it for whatever purpose you want. Thereby, your access is in your control. You can use it without any predetermined purposes provided by the provider. However, of course, there are some exceptions, so-called reasonable exceptions. Taking a typical example would be blocking of child pornography, for example. So it doesn't mean that it's open for whatever purpose, of course. As we have with all types of freedoms, they are you have to weigh one purpose against another one freedom against another one. So before we go deeper into discussion, I think I leave it by stating that it's important that end users have control of their own access. That's the purpose of the internet.
Okay, let's start with that. Users in full control of their access. So Which are the conditions for this? Is it something we already have now? Should we protect this? How would it work? Luca.
Thank you, Fred. So I think that if we have to analyze the topic of today, so how the open internet can coexist with specialized services, it has to be very clear what is the open internet and what are specialized services. So the internet was, we all know, it's a connection of a multiple network, is a network of networks, and it has been conceived with a layered structure and with an end-to-end architecture. So what does it mean basically? It means that to the different layers of the internet correspond different functions, and it means that the transport of the data packet is dealt by network operators, whereas the aggregation, the treatment of the information is dealt at the application level. That is why it is called an end-to-end structure, because the intelligence of the network is at the application level that are run by users. So what is the side effect of this end-to-end layered structure? The side effect is that the internet is a general purpose network. It means that it is not up to the network operator to regulate how the internet will be used. The network operator simply conveys the traffic, and this is why they are considered mere conduits, because they simply convey the traffic. And it is at the application level that the information are organized, and it is the application level where the user is that has the intelligence of the network. So this other side effect of the internet, of an open internet, is that it dramatically empowers users. Is that thanks to an open internet where traffic is managed in a non-discriminatory way, and that was the default of the internet over the first 20 years. In that open structure, the internet user has, for the first time, the freedom, the real freedom to seek, impart, and receive information without restrictions and without, regardless of frontier. So this structure is what really empowers the user. This is essential for freedom of expression for the user. So what is the problem here? The problem is that over the past 10 years, network operators have acquired the technical capability to handle traffic in a discriminatory fashion, for instance, blocking, filtering, or even prioritizing or slowing down specific application. This is not a problem per se. The problem is that at the same time, network operators vertically integrate with content application providers. So besides having the capability to discriminate, they also have an economic incentive to do so. So this could be a simple hypothesis, but since 2012, BEREC has shown with the report that in Europe, 22% of the fixed connection are interested by these discriminatory practices, and up to 50% of the mobile connection are interested by these specific discriminatory practices. So that means that breaches of net neutrality, discriminatory traffic management is the norm for half of mobile users and 1/5 of internet users in Europe. That is what happens in this moment. That is why we need policies and regulation on net neutrality, to protect the original end-to-end open structure and not allow intermediaries to decide how we use the internet. And by the way, if one, I'm concluding with this, if one reads the jurisprudence of the European Court of Human Rights, that is exactly what the European Court of Human Rights says since the 90s. The European Court of Human Rights, since the Autronic case in 1990, is repeating that interference on the means of distribution of information determine a restriction of individuals' freedom to impart and receive information. So the fact that an operator has the possibility to restrict and to manage traffic in a discriminatory way has an impact on the freedom of expression. And it is what has been repeated by the European Court of Human Rights since over the past 25 years, especially 2 years ago with the landmark case, the Ilderim case, where besides repeating this principle, the court has also said that restriction to freedom of expression have to be foreseen in a specific, clear, and predictable legal framework. So what the court actually says, and what the court actually says applies at the Council of Europe level, so at the Council of Europe member states level, so the 47 members of the Council of Europe, is that the restrictions on the means of distribution, so also electronic network, have an impact on freedom of expression. And those restrictions have to be regulated by law.
Thank you, Luca. So it's a fairly good statement. I'd like to come back on what we try to achieve here, and this is often a conversation on how is or are IP services a threat for what you describe. So we got the open internet. To my knowledge, it functioned quite well. I was able to receive a lot of services, including Skype or Netflix on my open global internet. So now I see a new race, a new sort of services, IP services, but I understand that it might be a threat. So we just developed and described the open internet. Is someone want to take a ride on what are IP specialized services? Because I want to make sure that we're talking about the same technical concepts. Who want to try it?
Can I just conclude my thought saying that...
I thought you did, but okay, do it again.
Unless someone else wants to start with what are specialized services. The thing, what I'm saying is the internet, an open internet has to be preserved like that, but that is not incompatible with specialized services, as long as those specialized services that require some enhanced functionalities, for instance, high definition, high quality, or high security, they are kept separated from the open internet. If those two things are kept logically or physically separated, they are perfectly compatible. ISPs can experiment new business model. The open internet is protected. So as long as those two things are kept separated, everyone is happy. But maybe now someone else wants to comment.
No, I'm happy that you're saying this. So it seems quite simple. So actually, we just solved the whole issue. But let's continue. Frode.
I understand specialized services as a kind of a regulatory concept. It was, for example, defined by BEREC, the umbrella organization of the European regulators, as a service where the communication is separated from the internet on the network layer, which means that the traffic is separated from the internet. And the reason for developing this concept is that there is a clear demand for quality of service-based services, says the ISPs. And in order to acknowledge that, we developed this concept. And at the same time, if we have a view of preserving net neutrality, it's important that specialized services are separated from the internet. If we don't separate them, they are actually a kind of prioritization over the internet, which is exactly what we wanted to avoid with net neutrality. So if we accept that the goal is to achieve net neutrality, then we need to separate specialized services from the internet. And of course, they also can't degrade the capacity of the internet.
Thank you. Thank you for this clarification. Does someone want to take it from here? Amelia?
Very good. Thank you very much. So I would like to come back to a thing that Luca Belli mentioned at the beginning of his presentation, which is the internet was created to be a network of networks. When we're talking about net neutrality, very frequently we talk about protecting consumer rights inside of one network. We're effectively not talking about protecting net neutrality on the internet. We're talking about protecting consumer rights on an intranet that belongs to a single ISP. And so I think where this discussion would benefit a lot is from having this distinction clearly made. When are we talking about protecting consumer rights in an intranet that belongs to one operator? And when are we talking about protecting consumer rights or even innovator and entrepreneurial rights on the internet, where networks can be all interconnected and where there's choice, not only in terms of what services you receive, but also in terms of what services you provide. The technical development that's been happening for the last 10 years, and very quickly in the last 2 or 3, is actually going towards software-defined networks, which I think is the elephant in the room that we're not talking about a lot. When an internet service provider is looking to make it appear as if their network is a network of networks inside of their single network by using software to create different compartments of that network. It sounds a bit technical, but it means you have one thing and you make it come across as if it's actually several things. where both legislators and the debate at large needs to be take a lot more care, is to always remember that one network is one network. If you're having a telco intranet, it's exactly that. And if we want to talk about protecting the internet in a meaningful way, we need to start thinking about this network of networks, the plural second network term in that sentence. And so this is what I would like to bring for the beginning of the discussion, and I'm looking very much forward to hearing other inputs from the panelists or from the audience on the network of networks and intranet ideas.
Thank you, Amelia. I mean, that is really spot on. So we're talking about two different things. We got IP services and the internet. Those are two different things. Now, how comes that many people believe that there is a threat with those IP services on the global internet? So how comes that we can see this? Because I quite like your differentiations. They are indeed two different things, and I hope this is clear for the audience. So, Gonzalo, how do you think we should best protect network neutrality? What's your take, and how do you see those both going forward? I heard the word separation, so how would it work from your perspective?
Well, I think that mainly the network neutrality is a competition problem. We had already, for example, been served in the IGF at Istanbul, stating that network neutrality was being born in the US as a problem where basically users, clients were not able to have different options for the ISP, and they would be just able to contract their services through only one provider. So that meant basically that this provider had the possibility to influence and to have some restrictions on the service because the customer would have no choice. And in fact, I think that this framework is completely different in Europe. We think we have many more providers, and users have the freedom to switch from providers from one to another. So I think that the competition issue, it's completely different here than the one that we have in the US. In fact, Vince was already talking about solutions to protect network neutrality, such as the unbundling of the loop, such as wholesale service providers, all which have been already present in Europe for many years now. So I think that customers, for example, have many options, like 3, 4 different broadband providers to have access to the internet. So I think that the best way to protect network neutrality would be basically guaranteeing that this competitiveness of the market is in place and that the customers have the information to make informed choices, and they have the information enough to be able to choose the different providers, and that there's a switching mechanism from one provider to other, so that they can choose and they have they have a good chance to choose the best service that best covers their needs. And in fact, with this competition environment, us providers will be willing to offer the best service possible to our customers. So it's against our incentives to block, to neither throttle the services that our customers are willing to get, because otherwise they'd be switching to other providers. And in this respect, I would like to say that at Telefónica, we do not throttle, we do not block any kind of service to our customers. And also, I would like to mention regarding human rights that we at Telefónica, and I would probably add it to most of the ISPs, we do not have any intention to restrict human rights. It is not something that we are not doing at any point.
Thank you. I see many hands raised within the panel. I forgot to mention we have 6 panelists that would be the audience remotely and yourself. I really, and we all would like all of you to contribute and participate to this panel in a very interactive way. So do we have any request or comment from the audience? Please. Do we have a mic? I can give you mine.
I will.
Please introduce your name and speak.
Louise Bennett, BCS Information Society. You just mentioned that in the US there is less competition between providers. what's the view of the panel on the fact that the European competition commissioners are now allowing much more consolidation of telco companies and providers in Europe, which will reduce the competition we currently have in Europe enormously?
Thank you very much. Can I ask one or two other comments from the audience, and then I will try to give the back to you. Okay, please.
Yeah, we have a remote. We have questions from the remote participants. I would like to read the question from Zdravko Jukic. A question for the panelists, if possible. Imagine a market with 6 players, 5 are offering internet access service and some specialized services, while 1 player is offering just some specialized services, but not the IaaS. Would that be a problem of network neutrality?
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
And also another question, just I'm reading on a Twitter, there is a discussion about the one internet, one is open and one is a bit closed. So please regard as questions and while discussing in the panel.
Thank you. I have seen this tweet as well, and I would like to thank the one who tweeted this, because there might be a problem in Europe and elsewhere, is that there is a temptation to label this intranet, like you describe it, Amelia, as being the global internet. So we might need to fix this here. I would like to take yet another question. Elvana?
Thank you very much. Elvana Thaci from the Council of Europe. I have a couple of comments. First, I find the title of this session quite misleading, and it has been changing, I think, throughout the updates of the program.
No, it didn't, but please comment.
It was net neutrality before, I think, at some point. But anyway, the other point I'd like to share here is that I don't see in the panel any of the intergovernmental organizations where legislation on network neutrality is being negotiated. In the European Union, we have a trilogue going on now on regulation on network neutrality. In the Council of Europe, there is an intergovernmental negotiation going on network neutrality policy. So this is, governments are really a key stakeholder, and intergovernmental organizations are a key stakeholder here. And if you wish all the views to be taken into consideration, the views that have been just expressed, I think it's useful to have governments and intergovernmental organizations on board. Now, I'd like to share with you the Council of Europe's perspectives on the network neutrality policy and the principle. Yes, indeed, we need the network neutrality principle because this is a derivative of the right to freedom of expression and access to information. And it was explained, I think, in the panel that traffic management can be an interference with freedom of expression. And if it's an interference, then it has to comply with the requirements of the European Convention on Human Rights on the legality, necessity in a democratic society, and proportionality. Now, how do you translate these requirements to this very technical and very, very complex, legally speaking, complex situation? In the Council of Europe, we have taken so far in a draft policy, and I stress it's a draft policy, it's not finalized yet. The approach we have taken is to consider the principle of network neutrality as underpinning the right to freedom of expression. As the right to freedom of expression, the principle is not absolute, it has exemptions. One of the exemptions is traffic management for purposes of, to address network congestion. Prioritization of services, which I think in this title of this panel is the IP services, as far as I understand, are also not prohibited. These can be an exemption, but there should be safeguards in laws and policies about protecting the right to freedom of expression, about notifying the users, about the quality of service that they are getting so that they receive what they're paying for. And they have information about any type of filtering or blocking of information that might be taking place in this context. So I'd like to stress this, safeguards for freedom of expression in whichever law or policy or regulation on network neutrality we will have in place. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Please.
I would like to make a statement as well as ask a question. In regards to what has been addressed already on the ongoing discussions on net neutrality in the TSM file. When it comes to network congestions, we talk about traffic management on the network, not on the content of the network. And service providers, specialized services are about content as far as I get it. My question is towards all of the panelists. What do you think are the dangers when it comes to saving the net neutrality? That's it.
So
what do you think are the dangers?
Can I
net neutrality.
Hold on right now? There are many more questions, and I thank you a lot for this. But if you agree, I would like to push back to the panel now. So we have three main avenues here, right? I expected the question, thank you a lot. I would like to park it a little bit right now. This is a US-EU comparison. We will certainly address this, but I would not like to hijack the conversation now. So we had a question about competition in general, and by the way, is it sufficient to ensure network neutrality? I guess there are lots to say. We had a comment on traffic management from the Council of Europe, and with the different aspects that we can take in terms of exemptions. I would like to hear from you on that one, and more generally on network neutrality and the danger. And then I'd like to myself add something, Elvana, you nicely commented. We all eagerly would like to hear from you where you are with the Council of Europe about your recommendation, network neutrality. I mean, what's the status of it? But that's for later in the panel. Who want to take the three angles? We start with you, Luca.
Okay, I would like to start with the competition question, stating that competition is essential for net neutrality, but it is not sufficient. So it is an essential condition, but competition itself, as well as transparency itself, does not solve the problem. In Europe, we have a highly competitive market, and with transparency obligations since 2009 with the telecom package. But as the BEREC report in 2012 has proved, there are still some players that use discriminatory traffic management despite of competition. This is for two simple reasons. First, if every player in the market throttles and has anti-competitive measures, you don't have a choice. Everyone is throttling you. So competition is useless in that case. Secondly, users do not realize that they have been throttled or blocked, because I would like to make a quick survey, even if the ISP says explicitly in his contractual agreement that he's throttling you. How many people in this room, there are I think 200 people, how many people have read the conditions of their internet access service provider? Of those 3, 4 people, 5, how many work for an internet service provider, or how many of you have no connection with internet service provider? 2, 3. Okay, so we are 200 people, and there are 3 or maybe 4 persons that have read that condition for personal interest. So that makes it a very tiny fraction of the internet users with the unforeseen survey that read and know that they have been throttled or not. So transparency, it is not efficient simply because if you have 200 pages of conditions saying how have you been throttled and blocked, you will not read them and you will not understand them. And competition is essential but not efficient, because if everyone in the market is throttling you, you will not have a choice. And besides that, as I was saying at the very beginning, the internet is a network of networks. So if you have some network that block, it also reflects on the other network's possibility to access the information that are in that network. So if we do not consider the internet as broadcasting, but as a network of networks, competition itself is not sufficient. Can I also provide a quick comment on the intention to keep prioritization as an exception? I perfectly agree there are exceptions to network neutrality. As freedom of expression, network neutrality is not absolute. You have expression, for instance, when you have a court order that tells you that something has to be blocked because it is illegal. For instance, for temporary and exceptional congestion measures. But hearing that prioritization is an exception, it is something that I do not really consider as compatible with net neutrality. And it was obvious in the recently issued FCC order that prioritization was banned, and it is obvious that prioritization has an impact on freedom of expression. So I'm very happy to know that the policy of the Council of Europe is still a draft, and I hope that will be corrected.
Thank you. I'd like to have Amelia.
Very good. So, first, on the competition and consolidation strategy of the European Commission, that's bad, right? Even the competition authority of the European communities knows that it's bad. They've received heavy criticism from competition policy think tanks. They know themselves that they're making the bad choices, and they're still making it because somewhere someone has convinced top-level politicians that you need consolidation in order to have investments. Now, Luca Belli mentions that the European Union is a place where we have a highly competitive telecoms market. That is only partially true. The highest level of investments we see in the truly competitive markets of the European Union, which is mostly Scandinavia. Like in Sweden, you can go out on the countryside and you still have 100 megabit symmetric fiber connection. Whereas in Belgium, when I came there in 2010, and I was a naive and young Swedish 22-year-old believing that I had landed in Western Europe civilization, and we had a 4 gigabyte traffic limit per month. I could not watch YouTube videos, every day and still be within my quota, which was incomprehensible to me at the time, but which is still the case for some Belgian households. There are no fiber-to-the-home connections in all of Belgium. In Germany, less than 1% of all the households have fiber-to-the-home connections. This clearly is not because they have too much competition, it's because they have too little competition. And so I disagree that we've succeeded on the competition part in the European Union, and I think the net neutrality discussions that we're having are largely actually caused by the fact that the vast majority of European citizens do not have as many choices as they need, the investments are far too low, and it's because politicians down-prioritize competition for whatever reason. Now, as regards with the freedom of speech and human rights protections, like traffic management has privacy implications, it has freedom of speech implications, but my feeling from the European Parliament, which I know Eva is more updated than me on this, but when I was there last year, we ended up talking about these dreary kind of business model selections for ISPs, like imagine you're an ISP and you have a network, then what kind of business model would you like to inflict on your consumers? And the legislator is not the most appropriate actor to be discussing specific business models. They could choose something like, in the e-privacy directive of the European Union, the ISP should not in general monitor communications. That would be perfectly sufficient to not have any unreasonable traffic management. People like the Norwegian Telecommunications Authority would afterwards go in and scrutinize the telcos and ensure that no undue traffic management is done. And the legislation, the policy debate as it's framed in Europe is too far from these general principles of what the legislators actually want, and too much into the grimy details of whether or not you can imagine an extra surcharge to be imposed on an end consumer in an intranet in a specific circumstance where some criteria are fulfilled. This we should leave to the business executives of Telefonica, because first of all, the discussions are boring, and the European Parliament is not the right institutions to have them in either case. Now, the danger of network neutrality discussions in the European Union is exactly that legislators and even ministers have been dragged into these business model discussions rather than the principal discussions of how do we deal with privacy, which is a big issue, how do we deal with freedom of speech in networks, which is also a big issue, and then, of course, the competition policy issues, which are also not being discussed. So it's like you have these three major principal issues that are so suitable for political discussions, and instead we're discussing everything but those three big topics that would be most adequate and relevant for both legislators and I think, well, at least this part of the panel and, for us to be discussing. So that would be my comments on that.
Thank you, Amelia. Actually, it's a good transition, if you allow me, to Eva. So this is a clear message from a previous MEP to a new MEP. So why don't you just stick to very strict principles that we can all agree on?
There are some people that are interested in discussing the 3 points Emilia mentioned. The point is, how do we make sure that we just do not stay at the stage where we discuss them, but we actually act upon, and where legislation is necessary to legislate on that, and not to lag behind and be slow in our procedures and processes, because this is what we are witnessing right now. And we can never be as fast as technology, but we don't necessarily need to be as fast as technology develops. But still, we need to make sure that we go enough in depth when it's necessary and bring all stakeholders around the table and make sure that we get to a balanced approach. I would just make one point on the question on competition. The way the Commission gives clearance, clearance decisions have been given with very strict Commission sitcoms. And in order clearance to be given, there needs to be a divest of certain assets to allow a new competitor to enter. And these clearances are only given if they allow a new competitor to use their network. So this is the way the Commission functions. And let's not undermine DG competition, which I think is a very good DG in one of the DGs that actually does most of the work in order for the single market to be properly functioning. But my main appeal before I leave, and I'm very sorry I have to leave, but the debate got shifted. I have an interview to go to record, is that we have to act in the European Parliament a little bit more fast with all developments that are happening and not stay stuck in the Council or in a committee or somewhere in between, because this does not help anyone. And then we might end up having the same discussion in 3 years here with not much development having happened in the Parliament or the Council when the discussions, trilogues are taking place. I'm very sorry.
Thank you very much, Eva, and thank you for being with us. Gonzalo, many people talk about you, actually, or Telefonica, Telecom, so up to you now.
First, I would like to touch upon the BEREC report. The BEREC report was released in 2012, and it was based on findings of 2011. So when we are talking about an internet wall, 4-year times, it's a lot of time, and things have changed there a lot since then. And we have more recent reports from, I think it's the ITRE committee, saying that net neutrality concerns in Europe are speculative and overblown. And to that, I might like to add also that if net neutrality was such a big problem, how is it that we had a company buying WhatsApp, which is a company relying on the internet? How would they be buying that for the amount that they did? And if net neutrality is a problem, if ISPs were blocking services for OTTs, how would Facebook be willing to make such an acquisition if we were to block those services? In fact, we had already Facebook launching a voice over IP service through the WhatsApp, and so far I have not seen any problems saying that the service is being blocked. So to be honest, I would consider that net neutrality, with regards to blocking, throttling services, and even from a human rights perspective, nowadays it's not a concern in Europe.
Frode, I know you want to jump on this because I heard many things here, including that we have no competition in Europe, so it's just a bit what did the regulators do? But more importantly, competition might not solve everything. So what's your take?
We've heard this argument many times before that net neutrality is a problem we have to solve in the US. And even though, as Gonzalo say, the BEREC investigation is rather old, that's correct, it clearly showed that 1/5 of the fixed accesses in Europe had blocking or throttling, and correcting Luca a little bit, 1/3 of the mobile accesses had similar problems regarding net neutrality in mobile networks. So there is no such investigation in the US showing that there is such a problem in the US. So to me, this indicates that the competition that we have in Europe, which we actually have, it doesn't solve the net neutrality problem. In addition to that, I would also like to mention that even though if you can choose a neutral internet access as a user. And you don't. Let's assume somebody don't, because they obviously don't. Some of you in Europe don't do that. And you are yourself choosing a neutral access. And then you want to use Skype, for example, to call a person. And he hasn't chosen a neutral internet access. This means that also some persons not choosing a neutral access, they are also influencing the others. This is the so-called network effect. So this is a way of reducing the size of the open internet. So that is why net neutrality is a question about an open internet access to everybody who are connected to the internet. It's not something for a few of us, it's something that everybody should have.
Thank you. Please continue.
I would also like to say to Gonzalo that you referred to an ITRA report. I don't know exactly which one it is, but I assume I know which one it is. And there is no investigation referred to in that report. And it also reports to that regulators are not complaining about the situation. And why is that? That is because the current framework allows operator to do blocking and throttling of traffic. So that's the current situation. You can't report that there is a breach to this framework, because there isn't. When we discuss net neutrality, we are discussing the next phase, which we may enter into in the near future, but maybe not. There is obviously a large problem regarding this discussion, regarding the new framework.
Okay, thanks. I have Luca, Amelia, and then I would like to get back to the audience because I see people moving and I'm sure we will have other comments. So, Luca.
I have many comments, but I will try to be very concise and just to focus on one very important issue that was raised by Amelia and also someone else, I guess. The fact of traffic management being also dangerous for privacy and data protection purposes. So this famous BEREC report, which is very pedagogic, I suggest all of you read it, in the 2012 report, explicitly explains that blocking or throttling are done mainly by using deep packet inspection. What is this packet inspection? It's a specific traffic management techniques that analyze the content of the packet, not just the header information, not only the destination, not only the addressing information, but what is inside the packet. So it is an analysis of your personal communication done by an operator in order to decide whether to block it or to throttle it or to prioritize it. So that is an obvious breach of data protection and privacy, and it has been clearly highlighted at least twice by the European Data Protection Supervisor. I suggest you also read the 2011 opinion on net neutrality, the 2014 opinion on the Digital Single Market Regulation. The Data Protection Supervisor explicitly says that deep packet inspection is not compatible with the protection of privacy and data protection in Europe, with the current European framework, and explicitly says that beside the telecom regulators, also the data protection authority should scrutinize internet traffic management practices, because those practices have the potential to hinder and jeopardize the full protection on the fundamental right to privacy and data protection.
Thank you.
Right. So first of all, I have never said that there was no competition in Europe. I have said that there are some jurisdictions in which the competition is very good. And then there are, unfortunately, a lot of jurisdictions where the competition is not good, which is largely because of inactivity of the regulator. You can compare the number of cases that the BIPT in Belgium has drawn towards Belgacom and the amount of cases that the Swedish regulator is pulling towards TeliaSonera or even Tele2, who's not even a former state monopolist, right? The Swedish regulator is active, Swedish competition is good, investment is high, the Belgian operator is inactive, the Belgian regulator is inactive, so the Belgian investments is low. On the over-the-top service providers, the European Commission and specifically DG Competition have actually launched a survey into how electronic services and information society services are competing. So we will be expecting within the next couple of years a thorough competitive analysis of how these services may or may not interfere with competitive practices And that will come, and I'm sure that if the Commission finds big problems, somebody will find reasons to act on them. But I don't think that we need to, if we're already in the problem now that we're discussing the vertical integration of the network of networks with the content delivery services, I think going even further up and conflating the discussion with more layers of market integration is not very helpful. I mean, our main objective here is, I guess, to be discussing the vertical integration that happens between access services and network owners, right? And so the net neutrality discussion is about when people who simultaneously own networks and provide access services are trying to use this vertically integrated structure to impose anti-competitive restraints or privacy constraints or whatever kind of restraints they are on their users. And I think we can keep it there. And then for these big IT services and the network effects, this is a competitive problem which we need to deal with separately. It's not an unimportant problem or even an irrelevant problem to raise, and I'm sure we'll find a reason to more heavily regulate whatever, WhatsApp, Facebook, or Google. It's just not so useful to conflate it in this discussion, I think. And I wanted to raise that point, which was basically...
Okay, I'd like to make another tour, Luca, and then get back to you. I have questions over there.
Richard Tilt from the Internet Watch Foundation. It's a UK organisation which works to combat the use of the internet for child sexual abuse material. We work by having material removed and or blocked. And this is really just a plea for whatever policy emerges from the EU that there should be a proper exemption for the kind of work that we do because of its significance. And I'd really very much like to hear from the panelists that they agree that such an exemption would be a proper way forward.
Before you answer, we have Thomas there, and I have some other question there. Thank you. I take two other ones. Christopher, yeah.
Thanks, Frederick. Thomas Grupp, also member of the drafting group working for Deutsche Telekom, and I have studied economics. So just a few comments on the interesting theory that where there is competition, there is investment. Actually, it's not. Where there is profitability, there is investment. That is quite basic. And I don't think that regulatory activity has, if you do the empirical test, anything to do with the level of investment in Europe. But that just as a remark. What I want to touch upon is another point. If we look at the greater picture here, you probably are using devices that have been manufactured in Asia. We're looking at services here on the wall that are done by US operators. Now, I understand you want that the European industry is investing, that we have the best networks, but at the same time, we shouldn't make any money with it. So I think we have a slight conflict of goals here that need to be resolved. And by the way, Luca, I don't think people have read the terms and conditions of Twitter, Facebook, and Google services either. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Can I have, I got another question here.
Good morning, Silvia Serrano from IGF Spain. I would like to share with the audience at EuroDIG some key messages from our annual IGF in Spain that took place last week regarding net neutrality. There are 8 key messages that I would like to share and perhaps can give some light on the debate. The first one is that the concept of the open internet is subjective and open for debate, but it must cover all aspects of the value chain of the internet, from user terminals to networks, platforms, and information in the network, as we have discussed. The second message is the protection of the open internet must preserve the freedom of choice of the users and respect human rights, as well as encourage innovation broadly. The third one, regarding access networks, the US case is very different from the situation in Europe. in most countries in Europe, the formula of well-executed competition and transparency can be enough in most cases to avoid ex-ante regulation for net neutrality. The fifth message is that in Europe, zero rating rates represent a commercial formula in which operators do not receive any kind of compensation from managing the data traffic consumed by the clients. But this is different in other regions of the world, so this is a difficult issue. Regulation, neither in the US or Europe, has been able to address the similarities between electronic communication networks managed by operators and content distribution networks, the CDNs, used by other economic agents that intervene in the internet value chain, which is generating asymmetries. The seventh message is that Europe needs to tackle the problem of internet openness as a whole, with a review of sectoral regulations to study what aspects need to be protected through sectoral regulation and which ones should be covered with a horizontal scope. And last message from the IGF Spain Annual Forum was that innovation must be taken into account while the decisions are being made facing the review of the regulatory framework, given the difficulty that the generation of new startups in Europe is difficult in Europe than compared with other regions like, for example, the US. Thank you.
One last question, Christopher, you want to say something?
Thank you, Frederick. I do not want to repeat what I said earlier today about the draft document, but I do think as moderator you should have reported that there was very little consensus around that room of the draft produced by the working group. First of all, for millions of people in Europe, specialized services is for the birds. I have regular, daily, everyday experience of at least 3 different networks. On a bad day, they don't even deliver email spontaneously, let alone a voice conference call. Until there's enough investment to provide serious access to the internet as it is, the idea that the industry can hold the European population hostage to only invest if you get your specialized services, it's really not serious. Secondly, and I echo something which was said earlier, there is very little competition, network competition in the fixed lines for millions of people. Now, you can say that in certain cities and certain jurisdictions that there are exceptions, but that's the experience, the everyday experience of most people for fixed lines. There's more competition in G3 mobile, but G3 mobile is not capable of supporting the kind of specialized services that you're talking about anyway. So I really think we should go back to basics. And before the industry starts asking for more, please deliver a basic service for everybody now.
Thank you. So, who want to react to this? Who want to take the floor? Luca.
I had a comment about a couple of comments, but again, I will try to be concise. Focusing on what also Gonzalo was saying about the fact that Facebook purchased WhatsApp and that OTT service can be purchased. And I think there is a very clear example at the European level about what traffic management distortion could have an impact on the market, which is Skype. Skype was regularly blocked in several countries before being sold to Microsoft. Skype was, in 2011, Skype, an Estonian company, was sold for 11.5 billion euros. It's a lot of money. But if it hadn't been blocked in I don't know how many, I think 11 countries in Europe, that should have been sold for 20 or 25 billion. So the thing is that it is not only about blocking an application which is perfectly legal. It's about also having an impact on the market. At the same time, you don't allow users that would like to use voice over IP, I mean, I'm not speaking about you, those that were blocking that specific application were impeding users to legitimately freely communicate with a legal application, and at the same time, they obliged the Skype shareholders to accept a very good price, but that could have been the double. So that there is also a direct impact on the market. Speaking about what Thomas was saying, that investment are where there is profitability, obviously, but if the profitability entails human rights violations, I don't think that we should focus on that kind of profitability. Maybe a little less profitability, but respect of human rights would be a better compromise. Thank you.
Thank you. Frodo, please.
A few responses from me regarding answering Internet Watch. Obviously, your example is an example of reasonable traffic management, to make that clear. But I think the main problem in the political discussion we have these days is that there is some misunderstanding regarding how the Internet is supposed to work alongside with specialized services. And therefore, I agree with Christopher's comment regarding specialized services, that it's important to secure the basic Internet access. And that is why it's important to differentiate between specialized services and the other services. They should be clearly separated, isolated from each other, so you know how much capacity you have for your Internet access service. Because if you don't know that, then there is no need for net neutrality. So you need some basic capacity which should then be neutral. Also regarding traffic handling for this Internet access service, there are a couple of exceptions, the so-called reasonable traffic management. Apart from exceptions based on law or on court orders, you have, of course, problems with security and integrity of the service, user-initiated aspects like spam filtering, etc., are examples. And we also have this very difficult congestion management. And to make it clear, on the Internet, there is already a lot of congestion management. So this is why the Internet works. The congestion management on the Internet is end-to-end based. It means that your computer, it doesn't send more traffic into the network than there is capacity for in the network. So there is no need for deep packet inspection to reduce the traffic. The traffic management should be congestion agnostic, which means that the traffic should be handled independent of which application you are using. And this works today on the Internet. So there is no need for interference regarding that when it comes to handling the amount of the traffic on the Internet. Thank you.
Luca, and then I'd like to take the floor back. Thank you.
Maybe, okay, I will be very fast, just to say that obviously there are exceptions to non-discriminatory management. Obviously, when some content is deemed as illegal, or there is a court order, or there is congestion to be managed, there should be exception that should be clearly defined. I would like, however, to highlight that should not be randomly categorized as reasonable traffic management, because you can use the term reasonable as long as what is reasonable is defined. Because otherwise, what is reasonable to me is probably not reasonable to Gonzalo, and maybe it is not reasonable to Frode. So reasonable is very subjective. And to stress this, I would like to, maybe you can directly read the submission that the ISP operator Comcast did in 2008 when the FCC was scrutinizing its management practices, saying that deep packet inspection, analyzing the content, plus sandvine technology to throttle peer-to-peer application was reasonable. So obvious violation of privacy and obvious throttling of some legal application was reasonable. So I suggest we are very careful and cautious when we use the reasonable term.
Gonzalo, then Amelia, then I'll take it back. Please.
Okay. Well, I would like to remember a basic principle of competition, that one thing is having the power to put restrictions, and other thing is exerting that power. So, of course, ISPs have the power to block, to do many nasty things, but that doesn't mean that we do it. So, we cannot just force a strict regulation that will prevent from ISPs from delivering services, just to prevent that these anti-competitive practices are implemented. We have a competition law that watches, that is very observant on the practices that all the operators do, and if something, an anti-competitive practice is arising in the market, they shall act upon it. Also, on the traffic management, I fully agree. I mean, traffic management implies that not all traffic is going to be treated equally. That means that we should be, for example, to provide the best user experience, we should be able to block spam, we should be able to block attacks of denial of service, we should be able to block child pornography. That means that not all traffic is going to be treated equally. That also means, for example, that in the UK we had a problem with iPhones when they were launched, and in specific applications were congesting the network. So we had to block those applications. So this means that traffic management sometimes requires some practices that might not be application agnostic, because some specific applications, some specific content might be the ones that are introducing the traffic congestion.
Amelia, do you want to add something, or I take it back?
Well, so one of the parts where the European Union has actually succeeded with competition law is exactly that we have access obligations on network owners. This means we have a lot of operators that don't necessarily own their own networks, but they're able to operate on other people's networks. This means in Europe, the competitive situation is slightly trickier than in the US, because a telco may not only be impacted by its direct relation to its customers, it can also be impacted by its relationship to other telcos. And when you say that telcos can restrict, but they don't necessarily restrict, actually they do. That's what the BEREC report shows, right? Like the BEREC report says exactly that not only can telcos restrict access to certain services for customers and other telcos, they actually do it as well. And this is why we need maybe a more strongly formulated competitive legislation and sectoral regulation, as was requested by our Spanish friends, to ensure that the regulatory authorities have even better tools than they presently have to get to some of these competitive restrictions that we're currently seeing in European markets. Now, I know a lot of our ISPs in Europe suffer from universal service obligations, like in France and Spain, I think Germany as well. There's some large telco that gets the obligation to provide services to everyone, which causes them, of course, to have expenses from that. The European Union may want to, and would have perhaps revisited that had they made a proper consultation before proposing the present legislative proposal that is discussed in Brussels, since every possible experience from the European Union and its member states shows that it's the countries that don't necessarily use universal service obligations, but that have a proper competitive framework with proper competitive oversight from a competent regulator with sufficient tools to engage in regulatory oversight, that have the largest investment, the best consumer services, the cheapest consumer services that are also the most net neutral. We literally stand nothing to lose from having a good and pro-competitive sectoral regulation oversight in the European Union, which helps our regulators and our consumers to get the ISPs that quite frankly, and I think Mr. Wilkinson say this, like that we deserve, right? All of these good services that we want from our networks, they're within our reach, but then we need our legislators to have a properly pro-competitive policy and not to listen to people that say, I read a book on economics once.
Thank you, Amelia. Look, I'm in a situation now where I would love to continue, because there were an elephant in the room. We touch upon this at many different occasions, and it is positive price discrimination, also known as zero rating, also known as, you have many vocabulary actually, sponsored data. We haven't really touched upon that one. It's really a big issue. It's a big issue in Europe, in the world. I understand that some data show that in the world more than 50% mobile operators zero rate, especially Facebook. So this is something we would need to address. But we have another 5 minutes, so I don't know if you want me to open the floor to this. If I do, I would just like to hear very quick statement. Is it good or bad? What do you think? Is it consumer choice? Is it something else? And then after this, I'd like to do what Christopher suggested, and I was about to do anyway, is to report to you about these documents that a working group has crafted the last 2 months, and I wanted to give you a status of this and propose a way forward. So, would you accept, but that's a deal between the audience, the panelists and myself, that we just address it, take the temperature of zero rating or sponsor data or whatever you call it. Do you accept that we do that in 4 minutes, or you prefer you just not address it and, okay, it's also a sign of something. What do I say?
How do we address it?
Is it good or bad?
Can you propose how to address it for me?
Yes. Is it good or bad? Or if you don't find that the question is good, we don't address it.
I think, can we do a quick round to do if it is, to state if it is good or bad? Yeah.
In Norway, we have net neutrality guidelines, and the Norwegian regulator has taken a position that we consider zero rating to be against the Norwegian net neutrality guidelines. So we think it's bad.
Thank you. If we have a framework saying that traffic management should be non-discriminatory, zero rating is obvious a breach of that principle, because it entails a discrimination of a specific type of traffic, and it has, by the way, also some negative consequences on data protection or on freedom of expression, especially when the zero-rated application is a social network, because in that case you have not only one filter, the ISP that decide how can you communicate free and impart and receive information, you also have a second filter, the terms of service of the application that tells you how to communicate and impart and receive information. So that is a double restriction of freedom of expression. So for me it's bad.
Thank you.
For me, it's like everything. It's not good or bad. It depends how you implement it. It's a commercial practice where we can offer discounts on traffic. That has been always the case. I mean, it depends how you implement this practice. For example, we have in Germany, we have providers offering Spotify services, which the related traffic to that is not charged. That's zero rated. In some countries, you have Spotify that is provided over a discount, while the traffic is charged. It's the same approach. It's a different approach, but with the same result. So it's a commercial practice that, depending on how it is implemented, it could and might be beneficial for users.
Thank you. Emilia?
I believe we need more vertical separation in the European Union and on its markets, not more vertical integration where services become interdependent on each other and the price structure and conditions for one service depends on another, which is more upstream. So I would, per definition, think zero rating is bad, since I see it as a vertically integrated competitive restriction on all market actors.
Thank you. I said, I know it's unfair. We won't start a debate on this. I just wanted to take the temperature of the room. I got already something. Is there anyone who wants to make a quick statement about that? And I apologize already, we won't have a debate on this. Maybe next year when we got some maturity on the issue.
Well, it's me again. It's a reference to the Telefonica person. The thing is that we talk about competition, right? And you talk about the lack of capacity of the network to actually maintain the traffic, to allow content to go on the traffic. So if you are about to decide what kind of content to go on your network and what kind of content your network can handle, this is censorship. So why not increasing your network's capacity? If you cannot offer a service, just don't offer it, right? Why not investing in increasing your networks? Slow internet is very convincingly used for censorshiping the content. And internet is numbers. They don't care about the content. They care about what the number says, right? You don't have the capacity to say whether a porn movie should go on your network, whether a politically sensitive article should go on your network, etc., right? It's about how big is this platform for your network. So please increase your network's capacity.
That's a good one. It might just be one of the conclusions of this today. Actually, I would like to thank the panel for their great participation and contribution. I have a duty now, and I would like you not to leave the room before I finish with you. I have a duty. I'd like to report on something that was a collective work that we started 2 months ago, and that we called the draft statement of EuroDIG on network neutrality. So I'd like to, again, give you some background of this initiative, and I will do something which is quite difficult for me. I will actually promote something which is not my paper. So that's my duty. I mean, I tell you, if I would have drafted this paper myself, it would have been different. And I believe it's true from all the members of this drafting group. So you see what I mean. We were happy, yet we would not have done this way if we would have entire responsibility. So we started this process on a very open way, an inclusive way. We opened for a wide consultation in Europe, and we were hoping, and yet we received many comments from different persons. Yet it was at the European level no more than 15 persons, but we were happy because we had a truly multi-stakeholder participation into this paper. So I again would like to thank some of the key persons in this group. We got Luca, we have got Gonzalo, we have got EBU, and we have got for the technical side expert from the IATF. So what happened next was that we came here to the EuroDIG with this paper, and still open process for people to comment, and we announced it, and we wanted this room and this audience to know that this paper exists. We opened up for another round of comments this morning, and we expected this. Some people who were completely unhappy with the paper. And I tell you, we expected it. I mean, I had most people unhappy because they felt that we would not be at the level they would expect we would be. That's a good compliment, by the way. They would expect much more from this group. Some other people were really disappointed because we just exclude the notion of zero rating. We actually recognize that zero rating is a really critical issue in network neutrality. Let's face it. It's a really important elephant in the room of the network neutrality discussions. But we felt that we didn't have enough ground to just continue the discussion, so we wanted to state it. So we wanted to say clearly, you know what? There will not be any inclusion of zero rating issues that would frame the discussion that we had. So it was something even in the wording that we discussed. So at the end, we had this morning conversation with people who were not happy, but I would like to state again what is a multi-stakeholder process. The outcome of this paper, I would not ask nobody in this room to endorse it. I would not ask a government or the European Commission or the European Council or the Council of Europe to endorse a position. It is, and it exists, we have worked on something that exists and we cannot ignore it. We have open process, we have a good group. I agree that we can disagree, but I would need to stand up firmly to tell you that I have got the chance to work with great experts, starting with you, Gonzalo, and you, Luca, who told me that at the end, even if the process was a quick process, you would agree with the content of this text. I have this from you, and I'm very happy to say it to you all that we have something. So my objective now is to just check, as we did this morning, I would like to check the temperature of this room. Again, it's something that happened here in the EuroDIG. This is a picture of here and now. And if I don't see in this room And I understand that some people might stand up and say, I don't like it. But this is the multi-stakeholder process. If I don't see clear opposition from the majority of this room, I will consider that I will take this document saying, we have something in EuroDIG, and I would like to talk about that at the next IGF. No more, no less than this. Up to you guys.
Had the majority of the room even read the paper?
I assume they have, but this is the multi-stakeholder process. So who has a chance? I would like everybody's attention. Who has a chance to read this paper? Okay.
And how many people now?
How many of you who read it say, you know what, I agree to disagree, but I not only don't like this paper, but really I strongly oppose it. Not over my dead body. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 persons. So does it mean that I have from the rest of this room something that might say, look, I would never have written this document, but I have something that I can live with? And if this is the case, I would like to tell officially EuroDIG that even though we have an imperfect document that someone would call toxic, that someone would not like it, I would like to say to the EuroDIG no, that we have something that is a first stage in the network neutrality
I mean, I'm sorry, but in the spirit of multi-stakeholder consensus or even the IETF kind of rough consensus humming, it would seem to me that if we have at least, I saw maybe 7 people or up to 10 people strongly disagreeing with this text, which means they're not only saying there's a slight problem in the margins, they're actually strongly oppose it and would not have wanted to participate in a conference that later has this as an outcome. Now, in any normal multi-stakeholder process, whether it be technical or whether we've previously done it at the IGF or in the net neutrality dynamic coalition that I know Luca was in for a long time, that would indicate that we need to go back, revisit the text, perhaps now that more people are aware of the process, we can reopen an emailing list. I know you have the excellent expertise of Mr. Belli, who will be able to help you in setting up this digital discussion platform, and you can come back to it in a couple of months. Finally, it's not so important that EuroDIG adopts something now on this issue. There is no harm in you going back, revisiting some of the paragraphs, seeing can anything be improved, can we have these strong opponents, maybe slightly less antagonistic. You know, you have the time to do that. Don't worry, chill out.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. I don't want to force. And again, Amelia, we are learning in the process. And seriously, as I said, it's not my paper, but I'm proud of the work that we've done. And you know what? We're quite cool right now. So I would like to just tell you that I see what you mean. I would like to just check with this room. I don't want to push for something that nobody wants. I just want to check if there is something that people like and want to just continue. Thomas.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I think this is this is the multi-stakeholder reality where also the rules of the game are not set by somebody at the top, but actually we somehow need to agree on what basis we discuss and so on and so forth. So that's part of the fun also of the multi-stakeholder exercise. I think we need to be very careful here in the sense that we don't create or give signals that are not truly reflecting the situation in either way. So what happened here is, as I said yesterday, based on Net Mondial, knowing that there is something similar that will happen for the IGF, we made an experiment. We're very thankful to those who participated in that experiment. That was open, it was transparent, that's a fact. It's also a fact that not everybody was aware of this, because we all have thousands of other things to do, of emails to read and processes to follow. So we should take care of the fact that not everybody was participating for several reasons. You're also right, there's no force that forces us to adopt something here. We may take this and use this. The question is how. So I think there are basically two, and having talked to some people, there are two possibilities. Either we say, okay, this is a draft, there will be a continuation in working on this document in that working group that will then probably be enlarged, we may not get to something, given the positions, very soon. So that may, the purpose of this, to have a tangible outcome of this EuroDIG in the form of a paper, may not work if we reopen the text, but we can reopen the text. If we decide that we want to have something now that we don't want to reopen, then we need to make sure that the text plus maybe the framing of the text reflects the situation where we are, that reflects the situation that this is a very hotly debated issue, that the fact that not everybody has been fully involved in this new experimental process so far. So I think that there are these two options, and we should get clarity before we leave from here how this, the stature of this text is, what the procedures are. And if we go for the second option, that we would say, okay, we leave the text as it is, as a mirror of the debate in this working group until the 1st of June, or whenever the working group ended. But then we should frame it, title it, accompany it, in a way that people understand that this was a contribution of the working group. It's a negotiated text within a working group of EuroDIG. So we shouldn't maybe call it a EuroDIG statement. We can call it a statement or a document or an outcome of a EuroDIG working group. It should be clear who was part of that working group. And we should accompany it with some reflection of the discussion that we are having, that we've had here. And then this would be a package that we could say, okay, we can send this out. Say, okay, there have been some people that were starting to contribute in a written way. This was the basis for a discussion at EuroDIG, and the whole package can then move forward. So that's my suggestion at this stage. Either we continue to work on the document, or we leave it as it is, but frame it in a way that it's clear what the level, what the status of this text within the discussion, which is bigger than the group that was drafting it, where this stands. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I have a very big concern. I will not accept this being a paper from the working group. How the process was set is that we will be drafting a paper to be open to the public so that the EuroDIG community will accept it. We stated from the very first minute that it will not be a document to be endorsed by anyone. Having the document being addressed to be a working group document and having all the participants in the working group being referred means an endorsement of the document by all the different participants, which is not the case. This is a completely different situation than the one we started at the very beginning. So I fully oppose to that solution.
Who want to comment? And then we will close.
I think there are some parts of the document as currently drafted where there are probably very polarized views. And I think the thing to do at this stage is to admit that there are polarized views, to say there are different views and these need further discussion. And I think if you do that, everyone will be happy with something going forward for further multi-stakeholder discussion.
Thank you very much. Elvana Thaci from the Council of Europe. I don't have any objection to the text as it stands. I had some questions on it, and I think it's a document that is being discussed. I don't have any objections to the document being carried for discussions in the IGF either. But I would like to stress a point I made earlier, the disconnect of this process from the processes that are happening with legislators, with policymakers. This is something I would encourage you to bring to the attention, if you agree on this statement, to bring to the attention and try to influence the policies that are being developed, the legislation that is being issued in the European Union and in the Council of Europe. So not to stay in this isolation from the ongoing legislative processes.
Well, first, thank you, Elvana, for saying you have not a problem with this. And let me answer to you. I had the honor to chair this group. I'm from the Internet Society. I don't do lobby. This is not my job. So I don't want to be associated to a document which is something that might be taken as a lobbying document. This is not my job. So this is why I didn't want to link this conversation to influencing or trying to have this being endorsed by the Council of the European Union. And you know what? I was even right, because after this morning, I had representatives of institutions who came to see me and say we cannot endorse it, because we are in the process to adopt communication position to similar issues, and I completely understand this is not something any institution should endorse, even not yours. This is something produced in a multi-stakeholder way by civil society, businesses, academics, and a lot of different stakeholders. This is exactly it. We wanted to take a picture of where we are right now in this discussion. And the reason why I promote this document is I feel, we are as far as we can go. I have seen many people in the group making, a lot of concession. So it means that they're all unhappy with the document, and at the same time they're saying, okay, we can live with it. So to me, it's already something, we have something. Whether we might not agree, I would like to say we have something with which many people here, or some people here, don't agree with. Perfect. But we cannot ignore that we have something. This is how multi-stakeholder process works. So now about the status, I would like to think like one of the leading lights in my professional environment used to say that we might have the first floor of a house here. So let's start building the rest of the house, but let's recognize that we have some building blocks that is a good start, even though we might not like everything in it. This is all what we ask. So I'm not pushing for anyone to be forced to endorse this document. This is not about that. It's just to recognize that today we have a picture, and on this picture I will see the face of people who make faces because they don't like it, but this is a picture that we have here right now. This is my point. I'm ready and I'm very open to continue the working group, but I would like firmly that we recognize that we have something, because we do. We do have something.
Frederic, I'm sorry, it's Miliana from Remote Moderation.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. We have agreement on remote participant that there is a need to rework on this document, on this statement. So just from the remote part. There is a need to rework, that is, to work on it.
Yes, thank you. My name is Hugo Schöttner, and I'm representing German government at ICANN. I have to admit I'm not a specialist on net neutrality issues, and insofar it's a bit difficult, but I just want to raise the issue that it is difficult for governments to endorse a document on an issue that is discussed in Council and in Parliament, where we as Germany have a firm position. And insofar, we are a bit in a very tricky situation. And if we talk about multi-stakeholder position, I wonder whether governments were involved in preparation of the paper, and I also wonder whether governments here at the EuroDIG, which also are part of the EuroDIG community, are able, at least from the European Union, governments or commission are able to endorse a document like that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and then we need to take a close. Christopher?
Frederic, just as a follow-up in view of the time, my first absolute requirement is this document does not appear in its present form with the EuroDIG letterhead. Secondly, I fully support, given the debate, Amelia's recommendation for further work in an enlarged working group. But that does require a certain amount of flexibility on all parts. And I think the debate this morning and here has clearly indicated that the document as it stands does not reflect anything approaching a consensus of this group.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to first thank you for this. This is what multi-stakeholderism is about. So again, we need to recognize that this is a great way to push things forward. So what I would like to do is to reflect this conversation, and that is we have still a draft EuroDIG statement, and this is ongoing work. Let's try to continue to work on this document, but let's recognize that we have a draft. statement of the EuroDIG. So this is what I will bring from this conversation. We recognize we have a draft, a statement, and we will continue to work and hopefully improve it.
Fred, just to be very clear, can we also define how, or at least what is the support that allows us to continue to work? Because that, I think, would be very interesting for other interested participants.
Okay, so let's take that this is at least, and this is, by the way, why I want EuroDIG to state that we have a draft, by the way. We have a draft statement, so I need to see that on the EuroDIG website we have a draft, and we invite, and this is a draft by the EuroDIG, not by the working group. This is a draft by the EuroDIG, and we would invite stakeholders to continue to comment on it. But I insist we have a EuroDIG draft statement. Do we have an agreement on this? This is a draft EuroDIG statement from now.
Well, but that can be changed. But the thing is, I think that was the option one of what I was trying to say, maybe not that clear. I think this is an open process. The working group has been open. Now everybody knows that this exists. We have a draft. If we agree that this is a draft and this is not the end, then you're right. We need to set some, as we go, we need to develop the procedures. Net Mondiale, nothing was clear in the beginning, and it got a little bit more clear during the process. And we can then decide when the community feels that the draft is ready to be a final document. But I think this, if it's a draft, it can be a draft EuroDIG statement, because we will at some point in time again come together electronically or physically and agree that either this draft will be final or it will cease to exist, in the sense that there will be no agreement. So everything is open and everything is transparent. And still keep this in mind that we have the discussion in December in New York in the UN about the continuation of the Internet Governance Forum as a concept, and so on and so forth, about having more tangible outcomes and so on and so forth. So what we are doing here is contributing to getting more experience in how could you produce a tangible outcome. So it's not only the text, the substance of the text that has a value, it's the fact that we are engaging in a process that is new. It's not really clear because it's new, it has not existed before apart from the Net Mondiale experience. So this is also the value of it, that we are trying to contribute to developing processes of multi-stakeholder, creating tangible outcomes. So please keep that in mind. Raul wanted to say something, thank you.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to ask for permission to speak here because I'm an observer since I'm from Latin America. But as some of you know, I had the responsibility of serving as a co-chair of the executive committee of Net Mondiale, which was a great experience. You mentioned Net Mondiale a couple of times. And it was very difficult to set the rules for producing the outcomes, and we faced the same complexity that you are facing now in terms of what to do, what are the process, and of course for producing outcomes we needed some kind of ambiguity, because as I said yesterday in the panel about Net Mondiale, it was the first time that that an outcome were produced in a multi-stakeholder environment without formal negotiation process. So it is when it's very difficult to produce outcomes without voting, and we are learning. And so far as I know, you are the first regional IGF that are making this experiment, and I congratulate you. This is very courageous, I have been following all the work that you have done in this with this topic, because I was very interested in this work. And I think that there is a very valuable work that has been done, and it would be very, really not very good to lose the work that you did so far. So in light of that, I think that's the way that forward that you are proposing is, I think this is very reasonable. And it's a way to keep, to save the work that has been done. I think that the objection that has been expressed by Gonzalo with regard to take this this document as an outcome of the working group is very reasonable. It would be a way to endorse the document. I think that's much more open what you are proposing, and it's difficult. It's not easy, and but I think that's explicit in this, specifically in this topic, Net Mundial, as the colleague from Norway said at the beginning. The issue is difficult to understand. There is a lot of complexity in the discussion of network neutrality. And so I think that's the way to move forward is just removing some things off the table where there are agreements and to focus the discussion in those issues that are really the critical ones and where the most important disagreements remain. So I think that this document is very important. It's a step forward that is very valuable. But I understand also the concerns that have been expressed. So I think that's, Thomas, your proposal is very good. I hope that you can save in some way the work you did so far, because I think it's very interesting and it will be also inspirational for other people to continue working on that through the Dynamic Coalition and other environments where this discussion can also feed the work that you are doing. And so, thank you, and sorry for my interruption.
Okay, so do we have Emilia?
Okay. I would like to endorse still the working group proposal. I mean, my experience is very meager from the European Parliament, but in the parliamentary environment, we have committees, and then later on, we send it to a plenary, and then we have a vote, and this is how we adopt stuff. I don't see exactly how having a draft, which is from a working group, to be discussed by a larger community is an impediment to any procedure. If some people feel very strongly about not having the plenary endorse the draft at this time, and they want further deliberations, I understand the impatience of ISOC in moving forward and having tangible outcomes to present for the United Nations in November or December, or you said December, right? So, but there is no harm in having a working group draft. That will have absolutely no consequence if you call it a working group now. On the contrary, I think it will make people feel more included, that first you say, okay, we have the small group, now we make it the bigger group and we discuss it until we move it to the largest group, which is the plenary. That would be also a very well tried procedure from other institutions. You have nothing to fear. And I would also like to propose that Luca Belli contributes more to that procedure on how the experiences were from the Dynamic Coalition.
Excuse me, before. I would like to mention that this is actually already more than a working group document because it was open. It was not to everybody's attention because not everybody had the capacity to follow all lists. It was open. We had comments on the website with a tool named Genius from people who were not part of this working group. So this was already beyond the working group. And I think that in this room, and also what I read on Twitter, I have the feeling that we can live with the approach to say this is a draft EuroDIG document. We have to define a process, how to work on it, and open-ended. We don't have to even set a limit, a time limit or something like this, not to put us under pressure. The EuroDIG Secretariat and among the partners with the community can propose a process how to move forward to work on this document. And it will be open. We might invent new tools on how to comment on it. We might improve the technicalities behind this. I think this is, from my understanding, at least the rough consensus or the consensus in this room how to move forward. It's already more than a working group document because it was open. We had comments from people which were not part of this working group.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we got a rough consensus, at least on the fact that we have an open draft statement here. Thank you very much. Can I have you clapping this panel, which make an extraordinary work?